Hey everyone, and welcome to the Real HR Show. We are excited to have you guys here. It is we're back.
We're back.
We are back. It has been you know, and a special guest. We have had this is Nakoa. He is young, if you haven't been able to notice, and wide awake. So we took a little time off for some summer break, and kind of as part of that did just a little bit of reprogramming and for the program, and we are excited that you guys are here. So we want to welcome you guys to the show. My name is Brenda Neckbottle, and I am known as the Brenda the HR lady. I'm an award-winning HR professional, and this is Nakoa, you would never know it, service dog in training. He's only 3.5 months old. And I'm really hoping to see what CBD oil does for him. Hi. And then with us is also Suzanne, the evil HR lady, Lucas. And we are just excited that you guys are here. Again, we are doing a little bit of a new format for our show. Looking forward and is excited to today's conversation. You guys can find us on our social media, and we're going to flash those little channels up. And I'm in the process of getting literally my arm chewed off right now. And so I'm doing this left-handed. It's going to be really interesting. But you know what? Hey, such is the nature of what we do. Nothing is ever predictable, and we like to keep it very interesting. So,
and if
all right. So today's topic, do you want to kick it off? It's a workers' comp claim.
That's right.
Right now, my arm is just extremely wet. It's really what it is more than anything else. It's just really wet. So would you like to go ahead and kick us off today, my dear?
I would. So we were chatting about what we need to know as HR managers versus what you need to know as just a manager. And clearly, the HR manager needs to have a specialized set of knowledge, but HR managers regular managers need to know enough to know when they need to get HR involved.
Yep.
And so we wanted to talk today about some of those things that managers really need to know, kind of like an HR 101 for managers. And what prompted this was I got a question today that I answered on my blog, evilhrlady.org. And in it, a person had told his manager that his doctor had said, you can't come in to the office yet. He has multiple sclerosis, and the doctor doesn't feel comfortable sending him back to the office. And the manager's response was immediate of, no, if you want to stay working from home, that's a pay cut. And what the manager undoubtedly didn't know was that having the employee say that should immediately kick off this might qualify under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the manager doesn't have to know whether it does or not. The manager doesn't have to know how to walk through the interactive process, but the manager needs to know, I need to call HR and get them involved. Right. And that's one of those things that managers need to know.
They just need to know what are the triggers, really.
Right.
What triggers the need to connect with HR? What triggers the need to get HR involved? And what are not the triggers when they're very excessive? And a lot of managers, because this isn't what they do. They do their job, whatever it is, right? So they don't always necessarily know what could be construed as important and what's not. And nor do they also think to take the time to ask. And so that's a big key frustration point for a lot of people who are in this realm. But it's also frustrating for the managers too, because they don't want to constantly be made to feel wrong either.
Right. Right.
And and it does come up. The more you correct them, the more they feel like, oh my gosh, why am I always on the firing block with you? And that's not the case. You may just be trying to help them understand, but for them, they don't think a lot of this stuff is that important, just simply because they just don't know.
Right. And one of the things that I see over and over and over again is, well, I live in an at-will state, so,
Yeah.
and the reality is everybody except Montana is an at-will state. But at will doesn't mean fire willy-nilly. You still need to follow the laws, and there are still things that protect people's jobs. And managers represent the company. And so going to court and saying, well, I didn't know about the Americans with Disabilities Act isn't a defense. I mean,
Oh,
it's a
no.
defense. It's not going to fly.
No, it's not. And you know what a lot of managers also don't realize is that there's a lot of individual liability involved too. They don't recognize that if they fail to address something or appropriately, or fail to engage in something, they can be taken to court as well. Sexual harassment is a perfect example of that. So they are legally obligated in just about every state. I don't know a state that doesn't require it. But if a company is not addressing it, if a manager, as you said, represents the company and is not bringing problematic employee issues to a head, particularly around sexual harassment, not only can the employee, if it doesn't get addressed, take the company to court, they can actually go ahead and take the manager to court individually. And HR people, for the most part, we're the ones that we and the CEOs of the company hold the largest level of individual liability when it comes to our human capital and managing it. But managers definitely fall into play with that as well.
And people need to be aware. So when we're talking about disabilities, Family Medical Leave Act things, right now, if your company is subject to FFCRA and somebody says, my kid's daycare just shut down again, all of these things they need to know. Not how to administer the programs, not what forms have to be filled out, but just they need to know enough to say, let's go down to HR and see what they say. And this is also a boon for managers, because not every time when an employee comes and says, I have this disability and I need this accommodation, do you actually have to give it? Not everything counts. And even something that counts as a disability, the employee's preferred accommodation doesn't necessarily have to be what it is. But let HR be the bad guy, and let us be the evil side. Let me say, look, what you're asking isn't reasonable. This is not going to work for us. Let me take that, and that helps you to maintain your good relationship with the employee. And I'm happy to be the bad guy, the evil HR lady. I'm happy to do that.
And you know what? And before you even have to get to that evil section, there's so many options to exercise. And we couldn't list them all just because we don't have a situation. There's, Lord knows, every company has all their various variables that go along with it. But the thing is that if you're not engaging in the conversation, you're inducing a larger problem. Or so how do you work with your managers to figure that out? So if you were to give your number one piece of best of advice, Susan, what would you give?
My number one piece of advice would be, when in doubt, ask HR. And before you take any major negative consequence on somebody, double check. Because that's where you're going to get in trouble. And that's one thing that you don't want to do. before you say, hey, I'm going to dock your pay because you came in late, you need to double check, because if that's an exempt employee, there's no pay docking for coming in late. There are other options for punishments, um, but docking pay isn't one of them. You don't necessarily need to know that if you're just a manager, but you do need to know enough to
Right.
say, this is a major punishment. I need to speak with HR. And the other thing behind that can be something as simple as you say, I'm going to dock your pay. Any payroll person worth their salt won't do it. And then it makes you look weak to have made this threat and it doesn't come through anyway. So double check to make sure, before you do something. And also, something like a pay docking thing, where there are situations where you can dock pay for a non-exempt employee and rare ones for an exempt employee. But you also want to make sure that this situation hasn't happened 43 times before, and all of those people were white and didn't get their pay docked, and this person is black and now you want to dock their pay. You just may get yourself not only in a pay violation situation, but a racial discrimination situation.
Yeah.
And you may not have that information, but that's why HR exists. That's why we're there.
Yeah. So when it comes to HR people who are sitting in the seat and they think, okay, this is great. How do I get my managers to jump on board with something like this? How do I work with them so that they understand? And it's going to take, I can tell you from experience, it just takes a while. It takes a while to train them. It takes them a while. It takes experience, and it takes unique situations, and it takes some successes and it takes failures. This is not something that you can just do something simply overnight or have one session and feel comfortable that your managers are going to do what it is you need them to do. One of the things that you can do is, have a monthly meeting or a regular, whatever interval works for your company, so long as it's frequent enough to where you can have your team members together and you can educate them, and you have to train them how to respond to employee inquiries, employee issues, and employee questions. That's one of the biggest things. And, they have to also see you as a partner. They can't just see you as a determining factor or the last result. They need to understand. Now, some people will buy into it, some people won't. But the more you reinforce that mindset, the better you'll be able to work within it.
Right. And I really like what you said about being a partner.
Yeah.
Um, and HR really should be a partnership with managers. And I said I'm happy to be the mean one involved, but that shouldn't always just be HR's role. It's a lot better if you get us involved sooner, and maybe we can come to a solution that heads off the problem before it gets to a big state where you're thinking about a punishment. There can be lots of different solutions. Like you said, there's tons of solutions out there, and the employees saying this is the solution I want isn't necessarily the solution that's even best for the employee. We can come at it with some ideas of how things work around some best practices, and we can consult and figure out, hey, this is how we can make this best for the employee and for the company. This is how we can approach this problem with you have a tardy employee. There are different things other than doing something punitive. And we can even ask the question, well, does it matter what time this person comes in? There's a lot of jobs where it doesn't. There are a lot of jobs where it does. But we need to be able to differentiate between those two and say what's important and what's not important.
Right.
And I really do get concerned with how many companies just say, congratulations, you're a manager. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Here's your direct reports. Please do performance appraisal in December.
So because when you get a new manager, they're underneath a lot of overload and they're figuring out how to be a manager, but they don't know any of this stuff, right? I've always found that when I work with any manager and I do like a monthly sit down meeting with them and I allow a Q&A with them, our relationship is much better. They are learning what it is that I need them to do and how I need them to respond. But the most importantly, I am better understanding their needs too. I start to understand what their employees' issues are, what their people problems are, what their process issues are, and able to help them figure out some of those obstacles. And not to mention, it shows that you're very approachable.
I think this is really important. And I've said this before, I think, on this show, but I've definitely written about it. That my first real professional HR job was for Wegmans, the best grocery store in the entire world. Um,
We should get paid for that.
they they should be paying me still. They really should. I mean, and I've been to 50 countries, and I can say Wegmans is the best. Anyway, um, one of the things that they did, I was corporate HR and I was a corporate HR analyst. So, like, I sat in a cube and I did stuff with data. They still sent me to work in a store. And for 3 weeks, I stocked shelves. I worked in the seafood department, which I don't like fish at all. And now I really don't like fish. I made subs, I sold pizza, I did fruit, I did everything. And they have every HR person, they have actually every corporate person, at least they did when I was working there, do that. And it did change my perspective. All of a sudden, I realized why turnover was higher in this particular department versus that particular department, because I had worked in both. And this first department was a lot harder. It was a lot more on the feet. It was a lot more customer interaction where you have to be cheery while you're on your feet, while you're lifting huge boxes of produce all of the time. And it gave me some insight. It also gave me some insight as to turnover in different stores. I learned when I worked with the on-site HR managers, why this store was different from this store, and the population it was serving and the population it was hiring from, and all of those things really made a difference. So then when I'm reporting back on their data, I know the story behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was me as an analyst. But what if I am a corporate HR manager and I'm trying to make policy? When I was in college, I worked at Kmart, which is not the best store in the world. It was one of the worst. And they required us to wear dress shoes. I was a cashier. I stood behind a counter. I never came out from behind the counter. I was always behind the counter. But the rule was dress shoes. Well, the person who made that rule hadn't spent 40 hours on her feet. Whereas every HR manager at Wegmans has spent 40 hours, 50 hours on her feet in a store, and you'll note that they don't wear heels. And I really think that makes a difference when HR knows what's going on, that back and forth between managers. This is what I need. Can you help me with this? Or, hey, this policy that you've come up with is not working for me. And then sometimes HR says, well, sorry, that's not me. That's the federal government. That's the state government. But maybe we can work together to find a better way to implement or something like that.
And something else too that I've used in the past quite a bit, that when you're working with managers and you're starting to develop this relationship, and you can work on your relationship whether you're just getting into the role or you've been doing it for a while. All right. That trust factor, that's something that is a forever building beast. And there are going to be days where you guys have it between the two of you, and then there'll be days where you don't, and that's fine. Just don't ever give up building it because it's so critical. And so, one of the best tools that I have ever used when teaching a manager to do what it is I need them to do, and that is to when they hear an employee response, knowing when to get me involved, is just to start asking them questions versus my telling them. Ask them questions, and that could be like, what is most important to you in your team? What do you understand? Like, if we're talking about this person dealing with this situation, or you've got an employee who's suddenly starting to exhibit this, at what point do you feel it's important to get me involved? And
Right.
you really get the insight into that person's head. So either you understand where they're coming from, or you are able to help them reframe it. And that's a really, really, really strong relationship building tool that you can use. It takes some practice, right? And if you haven't done it before, it's going to be awkward. You're going to feel like you're 15 asking somebody out on the date for the first time all over again. But you know what? The more you ask those questions and you see how people respond, and you don't just ask it to, check a checkbox. It's to engage in good conversation. And if somebody says, well, to be honest with you, I don't know when to bring you in because I don't know what is important. Okay, that's a great opportunity for you to start training and building in. I don't know what your preferences are. The way my old team used to do it was this. My old HR person used to do it this way, right? So unless you start asking those questions, you're never really going to understand what's going on in somebody's head.
You're not. And the other thing that I love about this model that you're talking about is that sometimes just the act of them talking it out gives
Yep.
them the solution.
Absolutely, it does.
And that not only serves to strengthen your relationship, it also serves to strengthen their confidence as a manager. And sometimes you just need to talk it out. And, I see that in my own life. I'll start talking through a problem with a friend, and then by the end of what I've said, I'm like, oh, never mind, I know what I need to do. A lot of times that they can do that. And then the HR manager can also, by asking the right question, can kind of push in the right direction as well. So you're not only building the relationship between manager and HR, you're developing the manager's skills, you're developing the manager's confidence, and you're also serving to help them with their employees, because everything is all working together. And that's so much more effective than saying, oh my gosh, the guy came to you and said his doctor said he should work from home. What the heck are you doing? This is an ADA violation. And if we can talk through it instead, everybody can learn. The result is going to be the same, that the employee is going to get what he's entitled to. And until we go through that interactive process and fill out the paperwork, we don't know what he's entitled to, but we assume there will be something. But this way the manager learns.
Yeah.
And feels respected in their job as a manager.
And sometimes, look, and these are the good managers that we're talking about. Now you're going to have managers that are not so hot. And you're going to have managers who, some of them are, working through issues. They don't have the kind of confidence, or quite frankly, they just feel backed into a corner to the point where they just throw their hands up and just say, just go to HR. And, you're going to have to work through those too. And you're going to have some people that just aren't going to jump on board with what it is that you're trying to do. Likely there are other issues that are involved there as well. Or they just don't really buy into human resources. And that's very much the case. And at that point, your job is there to just make sure that the company is as buttoned up as possible, and do what you can. Then you're going to have people that are going to be like, I used to have an engineer, and he would complain to me about the little things, but he would hide the big things. And so I had to sit down and I had to explain to him that, you use me to serve your own agenda. I said, and you can't do that anymore. You have to set your boundaries and your expectations. But here you have an employee who's violated about 3 security protocols. You're well aware of it. I found out second and third hand, and yet that's the one thing you haven't come forward to talk to me about, because he's so, he's one level deep in the organization, and you don't have a backup to cover his information. So let me ask you a question. How inside out is that problem? You can't keep coming to me because your employees are driving you crazy and there's all little things, and yet not report something this big to me, because that's putting you in the hot seat. Now you just put a target on your back.
And yeah, that's not what you want at all.
No. Sorry, little puppy redirect there.
I was to say, see, that's managing in the moment.
That is managing in the moment. And I would wish I could execute a disciplinary action right now, but I can't. This is, he's 3.5 months old. He's about 17 times his normal size than when I got him already. And he's training to be a service dog, but he's got a lot of puppy. He's puppy, but he's just a baby, and his teeth still kind of hurt him, and we just go through this. But you guys will get to know Nakoa as we go through this, because there's just no way around it. I can't even put him in a kennel or he'll just flip out. Like you would think that I'm torturing this poor dog. It just doesn't work. So he's a good boy. Just right now he's full of mischief. Right when we need to put this together. But you know what? That's the fun part about doing stuff like this, is that you got to enjoy all of the little surprises in life. We've been filming before, and all of a sudden, you'll see a cat's tail walking by Suzanne's camera, and it's just part of it. Yeah, it's part of it.
It's part of it, and now that school's back in session, we don't often see my children appearing. Although,
but you never know when they make a surprise appearance.
They're both home right now, but I have successfully trained them through this COVID to stay away when my door is shut. Then that means I'm recording.
Smart mother.
Yeah.
Cool. So those are our tips and tricks for helping you work with your managers, and helping get what you need out of the management team.
And we're going to add a new segment here at the Real HR Show. And that is going to be functioning as real HR people, because all this other stuff that we talk about, we have time to prepare and talk about and research, blah, blah, blah. But when you're an HR manager and you're sitting there and someone comes into your office, a lot of times you can't say, I will get back to you later. A lot of times you need an answer right then. So Brenda and I each have a question for the other person. The other person has not seen this question. And I promise I'm not going to do anything tricky.
I'm not going to promise that.
Define what the Smoot-Hawley tariff did for, I don't even know. She could give any answer to that, and I'd just smile and nod and be like, yeah, I remember that term from high school. But we're going to ask each other a question, and then we're going to talk through the answer, which is what happens in real life. In real life, somebody needs an answer now. So I have a question for Brenda. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. How would HR react or handle, this was a question from a reader, if it was made known to them that a senior exec is verbally abusive, demeaning, and all-out cruel to their employees? The fear is being a tattletale as well as HR taking the side of a senior exec. I'm at my wit's end. All right.
So what I would say, the very first thing, that if anybody who's been in a tenured HR position for a while or has the experience, first off, prevent your puppy from eating books. And the second would be to, first off, you have to investigate it. I mean, you have to dig into, find out what's going on. You want to get clarity. Here's the thing. You don't want to knee-jerk response in anything. But at the same time, you have to get very clear on what really is the heart of the issue, who's involved. And once you understand that, then you'll have a better idea on how to move forward. So we're eating a 3-hole punch now. He can have it. It's metal. Anyway, how do you move forward? And so the very first thing is, like I said, know who's involved. Figure out, where's this complaint coming from. You also, along the way, have to be conscious about protecting the environment and controlling the environment at the same time, too. So once you start talking to people, you help them understand that you're looking into something like this. You get a better understanding of what the details in the background is. Now, especially it's at the executive level, depending upon who it is. If it's not the CEO, if it's another member of the C-suite or senior leader, you have to get that person, that you got to get one level up involved. If it's the CEO, you have to get the executive or whoever the vice president is involved and just say, here's what has come my way. We need to talk through this and figure out how to proceed forward. If it's the individuals, if it's a CEO that you have to talk to about another member of the C-suite, then it's like, this is what has been presented to me. This is, clearly a very significant issue. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to start looking into this and create a massive organizational problem bigger than what we've got right now, because it will. And so you guys have to lay out the groundwork on how to move forward. Now, depending upon the type of company you're working for, depending upon the culture, the organizational structure, whatever, once you've done all of your investigation up front to get an idea of what's going on, now you have to investigate and speak to the accused. And that you guys really have to think through. Who needs to be there? Who needs to be involved? Who shouldn't be there? The CEO should not be a part of this, if at all possible, because the last thing you want is the CEO sitting on a witness stand. However, you may have to have the CEO involved. It could be legal that gets involved. So it kind of depends. And then once you get all of the facts, you have the conversations, you got to make sure you treat these individuals also with respect too, because you don't know everything. You're going to, in an investigation, you're going to learn a lot of stuff. That's just the way it is. Prepare to learn a lot of things. There's always two sides to every story, and the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And it's your job to figure out how close to the truth are we getting and figure out how to move forward from there. So I hope that answers
thorough your answer was, and now I'm terrified for your question because I'm not going to be thorough, I don't think.
That making you nervous?
Everything in that, like, you don't just say, oh my gosh, the senior executive is being horrible, let me go get that person fired.
Right.
It's always an investigation. And you don't also say, well, that's the chief financial officer. He can do what he wants, heck with you. You don't do either. You've got to investigate. You've got to go through this process and find out what the truth is. Because like you said, there's rarely a situation where it is completely black and white.
It's never. I have yet to run into one.
There's always gray areas. And of course, the person coming to you complaining is not going to list all their faults.
Right. Yeah.
But you've got to investigate it. The only thing that I would add is that sometimes you need to hire an outside firm to do the investigation.
It depends on this. It depends on the circumstances. Exactly right. And, then the last thing that happens is that once everything's been determined, you guys understand what the path forward is, what the disciplinary action is. Here's the hard part for the CEO. And that is the board has to be notified. The board has to be brought in on this. And so you don't want to mess any of this up, because the board is going to be looking at this even more critically than you are. And that could be, you could have a very experienced board of directors. You could have an inexperienced board of directors. And last thing you want are the board of directors making a knee-jerk response too. Because if there's anything out there that can totally derail a CEO's day, there's actually just a couple of things. Number one is the death of an employee. And the second is the phone call from a board member. Those are the two things that can absolutely, completely derail a CEO's day. And so your job, which is already difficult to begin with, when it comes to having a board, is to make sure that the CEO is as prepared as possible to speak to the board on something like this. Now, if you're just a small business and you don't have a board, that's not something you have to worry about, right? But more often than not, uh, all of those components that I mentioned earlier are going to fit, and they have to fit in well because of just because this is one of the apex leaders of the organization.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the CEO of McDonald's who resigned a while ago, 6 months
Mhm.
ago,
Yeah.
because he had an improper relationship with an employee
Yep.
and got his golden parachute and off he went. And now we find out that it wasn't one employee, it was many employees. And it wasn't just about the, sexy time. It was about giving stock options inappropriately. And what happened was that they didn't do an investigation. He confessed to the affair, he resigned, they gave him the golden parachute, and nobody investigated.
Which
Um,
means that their employment contract totally worked against the company.
yep, yep.
Sorry, I
And
didn't mean to interrupt you. It's just like this is the first thing that went through my mind.
yeah, they screwed up. They didn't check his emails. It was all his emails, for goodness sake, and they didn't check it. Um, Brenda's eyes may roll out of her head with
I
that
did.
one.
They did just automatically.
Yeah, you gotta do the full investigation regardless of who it is, and regardless of how it turns out, you need to protect the employee against retaliation. And as long as it was a good faith complaint, they need to be protected. It doesn't mean that they have to be correct and that this is an actionable problem. But as long as it was good faith and they weren't like, oh, I'm going to undermine, I'm going to lie about this to try to destroy this person's career. That's not good faith.
Yeah.
But
And you have to remember now, in a situation like that, the chairman of the board absolutely would have had to have been involved. If it were me, I would have, if I was with McDonald's, I would have, contacted legal. I would have gotten legal immediately involved, and gone with their guidance and their direction on how to proceed. Likely, it would have been to place a call to the board of to the chairman of the board, get them involved, and determine who else on the executive committee needed to be involved as well. Now, by not doing an investigation, like she mentioned, you had somebody that, they did a quick, like, hey, we've learned about this, but you can do an investigation as well, continuing into, after you handle the initial issue. And, kind of depending upon what the situation is, if you have a CEO who's been, arrested, then, yeah, deal with the immediate issue. I've I've had a client that's had that happen. He was arrested and he served 2 years jail time for putting a
oh,
video camera in the ladies' room.
oh dear.
Yeah. So so they had to physically remove him from the property until his trial. And so they went in and they did the appropriate investigation after they handled the most immediate thing. So, if you have a situation like that, I mean, there's a lot of nuances that come into it. But you also really have to go back and look at everything. You got to look at the employment agreement. You have to look at what are the terms for termination, even if they do resign. If it's that egregious, are you legally responsible for compensating them for their negotiated, termination package? So there's all these kinds of loopholes, and if you're not doing your due diligence, you also have to remember too, especially with publicly traded companies, or corporations that have, owned stock options, you may have to have some financial compliance piece that's added onto this. If it's a large company like McDonald's, there could be some SEO requirements here, or SEC requirements, excuse me, not SEO, SEC requirements. I get my acronyms mixed up. There could be something where a public disclosure has to be put into place. So it's just, I mean, it's complex. It's very, very complex, and you have to think through every single aspect of it. But that was an awesome question.
Thanks. It was a good
You want?
question.
You ready for yours? You ready for yours?
I'm paranoid now.
Are you ready for me to creep you out?
Ask me how many hours people need to work before they get overtime. I can answer that one.
No. All right, you ready?
Yep.
So this one came in. This is just somebody who I interpret as this being like really just curious.
All right.
All right.
I'm nervous.
How often do employees fake being sick?
You know, that's is that the whole question?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, good. And the answer to that is it totally depends. It totally depends. But if you have employees that you feel are pretending to be sick, um, either you totally stink at hiring or you've got a management or culture issue. Um, and so if you really feel like people are calling in sick when they're not sick, the first thing you need to do is take a look in your mirror and in the manager's mirror and try to figure out, what is going on here. Is it that we don't have a reasonable PTO policy? And our managers saying no to every request for time off. So the only way to get time off is to call in sick. Is it a question of people being worked too hard? Is it a question of right now when we're dealing with COVID, are people calling in sick not because they're sick, but because they're concerned about safety at the office? It can really be a signal that there's something else going on. Now, saying that doesn't mean that it's not possible that you don't just have slacker employees, because heaven knows those exist. But first thing is to look and say, is this a problem on our side or on their side? And if it's a problem on your side, that's actually easier to fix because you can change yourself as the manager, or well, you might not be able to change company policy very easily, but you can change how you manage. If it's a problem with the employee, then you have to work with and coach that employee. And you need to have policies in place. It's okay, not only okay, it's really a good idea, a best practice to have call-in procedures that are followed. And that you are very clear about it and require it of everybody, so that everybody is clear on what's expected when they are going to be out of work. And you can also clarify by what you mean by being out sick, because people have different definitions around this. And I've been doing a lot of back to work and back to school webinars for people returning with after COVID, and I'm really up to date on the CDC's definition of sick now. And this is something that maybe you could implement in your business as well. You don't have a fever, you're not throwing up, you don't have a sore throat or a cough or abdominal pain, you probably should be at work. Now, there's a caveat there. I'm not saying that a mental health day from time to time is a bad thing. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying when you have a population that seems to be calling out sick more than they should, that they are taking advantage of the concept of a mental health day. Sometimes we all need a break. But yeah, I don't have an answer for how often people actually do, though. Do you have an answer? I have no idea.
I don't, but you know what? I completely agree with you on the type of environment. So like if you're in an environment where you're heavy frontline associates and frontline employees, prepare for, for frequent absences. That's just the nature that comes with that. If you're in call centers, retail, I mean, I was in retail for 26 years, and it's a common thing. There's a day that has gone by in 26 years that I can honestly say I did not have an employee call in sick. Right. It just is part of it, right? But I think the thing that frustrates people is that they get so latched on to people calling in sick all the time that they don't look at the individuals who are calling in sick the most, and they take that general frustration out or they get that built up into their head. And I think you have to address your frequent attendance issues. And I don't think you really can address that until their time is past what they are entitled to, or the frequency in which they are calling in is excessive. I'll give you an example. A long time ago, we had a guy, and management allowed this to go on for a very long time. I'm talking about like a year and a half. And they had an employee that would call out every Friday and then would call out every other Monday. So he would have it, and you already worked 4 10-hour days. So he would figure out how to get an extra week and a long extended weekend. And he burned through all of his PTO. And he was that guy that burned through it the second he got it. And then when he didn't have it because he was a non-exempt employee, they just like, well, he's just not going to get paid. But what they forgot to take into consideration is that he also made commission, and he was very, very, how do you want to put it? He was very productive. So his commission, he figured out how to keep his commission up, but yet get more time. And he was always coming up with some excuse. And I finally said, I said, you got other people who are noticing all of this. Why don't you do this? Instead of keeping him on a 410 schedule and having him figure out how to weasel out another day of PTO and upsetting all of his peers, why don't you move him to a 312? And they're like, whoa. And I said, I said, if he can figure out how to keep his commission up and he wants that extra time, I guarantee you he's going to be okay working 3 12-hour days. And sure enough, they did. And they talked to him. He thought he was going to get fired at first. And they're like, no, man, if you just want the extra day, we can move you to 312. But the expectation is that you're here working 312s and you're not working 212s a week. And he committed to it, and success story.
That's an awesome story. That's an awesome story, because you didn't just look at the cold data saying this guy is missing so much. You looked for a solution, and I really think that is an important thing, to treat people as individuals and see if there's a solution.
Yeah.
Oftentimes there is. Oftentimes you can find something. Sometimes it's the employee, sometimes it's the manager. And sometimes you're never going to resolve it, and the person has to go. And sometimes it's the system. Sometimes it can be something that should be protected by FMLA. And what they really need is intermittent FMLA, but they don't know to ask for it, because they don't know what their rights are.
Right.
And as an HR person, that's something that we should look at. If someone's out sick a lot, here's some paperwork. Let's take it to your doctor and see if you qualify for this. And we're not doing it to be a pain in the neck. It's that if you have a genuine health concern, let's get you the support that you need and get you covered. But if you are lying through your teeth, then that doctor paperwork is gonna tell me that you're lying through your teeth.
Yeah. Or the one that you can't seem to get your hands on.
Yeah.
The one that you forgot. You keep forgetting at home. Yeah. But
you
know what? Yeah. 9 times out of 10, though, there is a solution. And that's always been my belief. There's 9 times out now in this situation that, the example that I gave you, we did have employees that were working 3 12-hour shifts. But if that was something that didn't exist, if you do that to one, you do it for all. So you create that precedence, right? So we already had it in place, and it was just part of the infrastructure. And it worked out great. And you know what? There were a couple other guys that said, hey, listen, can I do the same thing? Well, the staff took a look at, the scheduling to see if that was something that they could comply with. And sure enough, it was. And it actually made things easier. It actually produced more room in the shop. Employees were a little bit happier. Cars were getting done appropriately. And, and it made us stronger as a result of it. And it gave that flexibility. It gave the company flexibility. Now, if somebody, called in and their agreement is that, listen, this is a non-negotiable at this point. We're moving you to 312s from a 410. Your attendance has to improve immediately. It has to improve immediately, and it needs to be sustained. Otherwise, we're going to be taking a look, and it's a whole different conversation coming after that. So it was also resetting the expectations of performance as well. And he did famously after that. It was just that little tweak. And and it was always one of those things that leadership would question. It's like, why are we doing it this way? And they said, why aren't we? Look at everybody's productivity rates.
Yeah. That's a brilliant story. I love it.
Yeah, it was a good one. This is a good one. Yeah, till he got a DUI.
And if that doesn't sum up HR, I don't know what does.
That's a whole nother conversation, but he eventually did get a DUI.
That'll be for next week.
Kind of threw that concept out, but it worked in the interim, That's all right. Oh my gosh. But that was a good question. I like that. But how did you like that one?
That's good.
It's a common one. And the other thing is that, just people just don't want to deal with issues. It's like if you don't deal with issues, they're going to deal with you. It's as simple as that. So handle it.
Yeah, handle it.
Handle it. So guys, we are starting to come up towards the back end of the show. We encourage you to join us. Well, this is actually the old plate, but that's okay. We are usually posted by Tuesday at 9 a.m. And if not, we're going to make sure that we do. Again, you can find us. I'm going to throw our social media up here real quick. But in the meantime, we actually have a couple of groups that we are involved with and that we actually individually lead. And I would love it if we shared with you guys what those are. Take it away, lady.
I will. So if you're on Facebook, which you should be because the rest of the world is, we both have Facebook groups. My Facebook group is called Evil HR Lady, and it's a public group, so anybody can see anything that's posted there. And I just want to make that clear. So don't come in and say something that's going to get you fired because it's public. But we have a whole group of people, of HR people and people who like business. And we talk about all things HR, all things business. It's a politics-free zone, which may be appealing to some of you at this time of year. Our rule is I don't want to know who you're voting for. So if I can tell by your posts, then go away, please. So it's politics, but it is a business and HR thing. And if you have a question, people will jump in and give you ideas. If you want your question to be anonymous, you can message me and I will post it anonymously and you'll get lots of ideas from people. It's a really lovely group of people. I love them all. They're just great and super helpful. So if you want to join, come over to Evil HR Lady on Facebook.
That's awesome. And I have my own group as well. It's called the Next Gen Women in HR group. We are a group. We're about almost 180 members strong. We get new ones added in every week. And this month we are focusing in on vitality. And that is a state of being strong and moving forward. And some of the things that we talked about today, you just have to keep moving forward. And so we do things like free webinars. We pass information between all of us. We answer questions. It's a relatively young group. So the more we have people who get engaged and involved, the more that people will be able to grow and get strong and really get the most out of what they want in their career. And that really is the goal. That's one of the prime goals of this. And it's that mutual support. So you guys are welcome to join us. All sorts of new stuff. But the trick is with my group is that we have 3 questions that you have to answer and you have to provide answers because it's actually something that we look out for. And that is we don't bring people in who are not engaged in the body of HR. We only bring in people who are confirmed and part of that. So it's critical to us. So once again, my name is Brenda Neckwaddle and you can find me at my website at bestpractices.org. And you can find Suzanne Lucas to my left, who is at the evilhrlady.org. And thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been another really awesome episode and excited to see you guys in a week.
I'm excited to see you too.